An outsider hero gets the life he's always wanted with the help of bedtime stories. Marty Bronson, the owner of the Sunny Vista Motel, built and managed it with the help of his two children. Wendy, a serious girl who reluctantly gave out keys to the guests, and Skeeter, a boy who worked as a bellboy. For Skeeter, the motel was a magical place, as he always had ideas for improvements. Marty rewarded his son with bedtime stories. Although Marty knew he was a good father and host, he admitted he wasn't a good businessman. The fate of the motel was in the hands of businessman Barry Nottingham. Marty had always dreamed that the motel would remain the home of his children, but in order to avoid bankruptcy, he was forced to sell it to Barry, with the promise that one day Skeeter would run the hotel. In Barry's hands, the motel became one of the most luxurious hotels in Los Angeles and was renamed Sunny Vista Nottingham. However, Barry forgot his promise. 25 years later, Skeeter works as a handyman at the hotel, still devoted to his father's dream. At a social event, Skeeter is fixing the electrical installations on stage with Kendall, one of Barry's esteemed employees, who grows impatient. When he finishes, Skeeter jokes and invites the audience to greet Barry. However, Barry, who hates germs, refuses to shake his hand. As Skeeter leaves, Barry announces to the audience plans to build a new hotel, the Sunny Vista Mega Nottingham, with a secret theme. Skeeter is confused, while Barry's daughter Violet doesn't understand why all the fuss is being made. Barry then announces who will be the new general manager of the hotel, and Skeeter is disappointed when it turns out to be Kendall. Later, Wendy organizes a birthday party for her daughter Bobby. When Skeeter arrives, one of the kids grabs the chocolate cookie he brought, while everyone ignores Wendy's wheatgrass cake. Wendy complains about it, but Skeeter reminds her that she hasn't invited him in 4 years. Meanwhile, Wendy has divorced her husband, but doesn't want to talk about it. Her children also struggle with the divorce. Skeeter finds the little ones, Patrick and Bobby gives him a gift full of hotel souvenirs. Wendy then calls him outside and asks him not to mention their children's school, as it will soon be closing and she will lose her job. She plans to travel to Arizona for a week for a job interview and asks Skeeter to watch the kids. At first, he refuses, but agrees when he learns that Jill, Wendy's colleague, will be taking over the day shifts. Later, in the hotel kitchen, Skeeter's best friend Mickey reminds him of Barry's promise and warns that Kendall will take everything from him. Then Skeeter's phone rings. It's Jill, informing him that it's his turn to watch the kids. Jill makes protest posters with the kids when Bobby asks if her father could come back. Fortunately, Jill doesn't have to answer as Skeeter arrives just then. After Jill leaves, Skeeter realizes he doesn't know what the kids want to do because they don't like his suggestions. He suggests they go to sleep, but before he leaves, Patrick asks him to tell them a bedtime story. Skeeter flips through books, but none of the titles seem interesting, so he decides to make up a story. Skeeter's first story begins with a brave and handsome knight named Sir Popraveljalot, who is actually just an ordinary peasant who knows how to run a castle, but no one appreciates him. Instead, the kingdom loves Sir Ulysses. Other characters include Mickey as Brother Fred, the children as Mr. Stinky and Lord Smelly, and Jill as a mermaid teacher. One day, the king chooses Sir Ulysses to lead the castle, much to Sir Popraveljalot's disappointment. In protest, he moves into a giant shoe and is eventually eaten by crocodiles. Patrick is terrified by this ending, but Skeeter tells him that in real life, there are no happy endings. Bobby thinks it's unfair and decides that Sir Popraveljalot should get another chance, and so the story changes. The king gives him a chance, and Patrick adds that there should be candy falling from the sky, because anything can happen in the story. When Bugsy, their guinea pig, rings the bell, the children decide it's time for bed. The next day, Skeeter receives a call. The TV in Barry's room isn't working. He decides to go to the hotel and take Bobby and Patrick with him. In the meantime, Violet arrives at the hotel, followed by paparazzi. Skeeter asks her to look after the kids while he handles the work. Barry sits in the dark, angry at Skeeter, when he turns on the light. He needs complete darkness to fight off a cold. When Skeeter asks about the new hotel, Barry can't resist and reveals the secret theme: rock and roll. Skeeter warns him that the concept already exists in another hotel, which infuriates Barry. He calls Kendall and scolds him. Then, Barry makes a decision. Skeeter will get a chance to propose a better theme. If he succeeds, he will run the new hotel. Skeeter and Kendall will present their ideas at Barry's birthday party. Meanwhile, Patrick tells Violet about his crush, Trisha, while Jill comes to pick up the kids. Later, Skeeter tries to race an arrogant driver, but his truck breaks down. At that moment, candy starts falling from the sky. Confused and frightened, he tries to close the roof window. Soon, Skeeter realizes that the candy is coming from a delivery truck that has crashed on the bridge above him. At the hotel, Kendall is convinced he will win against Skeeter, and the receptionist, Aspen, is excited about it. Jill soon arrives with the kids and asks for Skeeter. After a bit of an argument, she leaves the kids with him. At home, Skeeter wonders if something unusual happened to the kids. He shows them the candy, but Bobby just shrugs and says they aren't allowed to chew gum before dinner. The kids then have hamburgers for the first time, brought by Mickey. When they finish, Skeeter tells them a new story. This time, it's about a farm worker named Jeremiah Skeets who wants a new horse to improve his life. He goes to the chief of an Indian tribe and asks for their best horse. The chief generously gives him a Ferrari, a bright red horse. Although Skeeter wants to end the story at that point, the kids aren't satisfied. Bobby suggests that Jeremiah should save a damsel in distress. So, Jeremiah encounters Miss Davenport, who is surrounded by bandits. Calmly and alone, he defeats them, and she sees him as her hero. Skeeter tries to redirect the story, but Bobby insists that Miss Davenport should reward Jeremiah with a kiss instead of money. Patrick adds that an angry dwarf will then appear and hit Jeremiah, thus ending the story. When the kids fall asleep, Skeeter asks Mickey to watch over them. Meanwhile, Skeeter is admiring the Ferrari in the dealership window when a man approaches him. Skeeter naively thinks he's going to get the car for free, but instead, he is deceived. The stranger steals his wallet. Elsewhere, Violet is surrounded by paparazzi and lost in the flashes of their cameras. When Skeeter arrives and sees the chaos, he splashes them with water from a puddle and demands they return the photos. When they refuse, he tricks the crowd by imitating the sound of a gunshot with his engine noise, causing them to panic and drop their cameras, which Skeeter then destroys. Just like in the story, Violet asks him how she can repay him and slowly moves toward him to kiss him. However, suddenly, a dwarf appears and hits Skeeter, prompting Violet to decide to leave. Skeeter then spots her Ferrari and thinks he'll receive it as a reward, but she looks at him confusedly and just drives off. The next day, as Jill arrives to pick up the kids, Skeeter realizes that they are actually controlling the story because Patrick predicted the dwarf strike. As he sees them off, he promises them a new, beautiful story when they return. At that moment, Kendall arrives to remind him of his hotel maintenance duties. Kendall thinks Skeeter's heroic moment with Violet won't have any impact. Skeeter responds by saying he's considering letting Kendall keep the job when he becomes the owner of the new hotel, but Kendall mocks him and compares him to Marty. Soon after, Kendall arrives at the construction site of the new hotel, which is located right where Webster Elementary School, attended by Patrick and Bobby, is. When he recognizes Jill, he quickly turns away, while Wendy calls Skeeter at that moment to ask about the kids. He ignores her and instead takes the kids camping, despite her objections. That night, Skeeter secretly takes the kids to the roof, where they roast marshmallows with Jill. She decides to let him off the hook this time. Skeeter then tells them about a star game he used to play with his father, and together they try to identify shapes in the sky. When Bobby asks if their father will ever come back, Skeeter reassures them, reminding them that they will always have their mother Jill and him. The kids smile. While Jill goes to her evening class, Skeeter begins to tell a story in which he tries to come up with ideas for the hotel, but since the kids find it boring, he adds action and romance, setting the story in ancient Greece. Here, Skeeticus, an underrated hero, finally gets the chance to prove himself in the grand arena. Using his tricks, He wants to impress the emperor's daughter and win the kingdom. Sceticus comes up with a bold move. He knocks down columns to create ramps, releases elephants, and plans to jump over them and land without injury. He performs everything perfectly, and everyone is thrilled. Bobby eagerly adds the romantic part. Sceticus wins the most beautiful girl in the kingdom. Bobby continues, saying they will go to an inn where all the girls who previously mocked Sceticus are. When they see him with the most beautiful girl, they become jealous and suddenly start dancing the hokey pokey. Later, on the beach, they find an unconscious man. Sceticus saves him by hitting him, and a fish comes out of his throat. When it starts to rain, Sceticus and his lady find shelter in a magical cave. Suddenly, Abraham Lincoln appears, but since it makes no sense in the story, Skeeter begins to get frustrated. He quickly apologizes, but the kids ignore him that night. The next day, Skeeter goes to the beach. Violet calls him and says she's going to Las Vegas. Assuming she is the most beautiful maiden in the kingdom, he leaves disappointed. At that moment, he accidentally bumps into Jill, who is looking for a job and decided to stop by the beach. She invites him to dinner, but the restaurant they enter is full of women who recognize Skeeter. One of them, Donna, stands up and reveals they are planning a high school reunion. The others start talking about him. Skeeter quietly asks Jill to be his fake girlfriend. Although hesitant, she agrees, and they pretend to be a couple. The other women become jealous of Jill's beauty and petite frame. Donna apologizes to Skeeter for being mean to him in high school, especially now that he turned out pretty handsome. Suddenly, the women start dancing the hokey pokey, which confuses Skeeter and Jill, so they decide to leave the restaurant and go to the beach. Jill says the kids will miss having good stories, just like in the story. At the beach, they come across an unconscious man, whom Skeeter manages to save. It starts to rain, and the two of them seek shelter under the pier. Jill wishes him luck with his upcoming presentation, and he invites her to come. It becomes clear to him she is actually the most beautiful maiden in the kingdom. In the rain, they stare at each other and slowly move closer for a kiss. As they gaze at each other and lean in for a kiss, Skeeter suddenly blurts out that something strange is about to happen. Realizing they're making a mistake, Jill pulls back, but Skeeter insists that Abe will show up. At that moment, a coin falls from above. Jill laughs and leaves, while Skeeter curses Patrick's ideas. That evening, Skeeter teaches the kids how to use shaving foam since their father isn't there to show them. Mickey asks him about his plan for tomorrow's presentation, and Skeeter decides to rely on bedtime stories. This is how their last story begins. The Supreme Galactic Council meets to decide who will take control of a new planet in the Nottingham star system. It's expected that the leader, Baracto, will choose General Kendall, but some believe the surprise will be Skeeto. Since the story takes place in space, Patrick wants Skeeto to speak like an alien, with his assistant acting as a translator. The fate of leadership is decided by a fight in zero gravity. Without gravity, Skeeter and Kendall fight using slap pistols, nose pinches, and ear tickling. However, since Baracto's daughter isn't impressed, he releases the monster from the nostrils, which sends them floating around. Bobby decides to kiss the monster, but at the last moment, Skeeter reaches the gravity lever and activates it. Kendall falls, and the monster crushes him. Baracto then declares Skeeto the winner, and everyone celebrates. However, the kids remember Skeeter's words about there being no happy endings, so they decide to burn Skeeto with a fireball. Skeeter panics and begs them to retract that ending, but they're already falling asleep. The next day, Kendall appears at Webster School and reveals to Jill that a new hotel will be built there. Skeeter drives to a birthday party, and on the radio, fire songs play nonstop. He stops at an ironmongery shop and buys things that could protect him from fire. The party is Hawaiian-themed and full of flames, which scares Skeeter. He even becomes suspicious of the waiter, who brings him a simple ice cream. When Mickey arrives, Skeeter asks him where Jill is, as she hasn't shown up yet. Then, Violet emerges from the pool, while Mickey hurriedly searches for a towel. He mutters, "I love you," catching her attention. While Skeeter is eating the ice cream, he doesn't notice the bee he accidentally swallows. The bee stings him on the tongue, and he spits it out just as the gong signals the start of the hotel meeting. In the living room, Barry invites ordinary people to hear their opinions on the proposed ideas. Kendall is the first to present his concept, praises Barry, and then reveals the theme, Broadway. The audience doesn't respond enthusiastically, and after his musical number, they awkwardly clap. Next, it's Skeeter's turn, and he suddenly starts speaking incoherently. Barry, confused, asks what's wrong, while Mickey translates that he was stung by a bee. Impressed by Mickey's translation skills, Barry asks him to continue translating. Skeeter then presents his vision. The hotel should be an escape from reality, a place full of fun, limited only by imagination. Kendall considers it mediocre, but Barry decides that Skeeter will be the new general manager of the hotel. While everyone congratulates him, Kendall faints. Later, Kendall approaches Skeeter and sarcastically congratulates him for having the courage to destroy his niece and nephew's school for the sake of the hotel. Skeeter is shocked, and when Barry arrives, he tries to talk about the hotel location, but Barry ignores him. During the Happy Birthday song, the fire performances begin, further frightening Skeeter. When Barry blows out the candles on the cake, Skeeter panics and grabs a fire extinguisher to put out the flames, which angers Barry. As a result, Barry fires him. In that moment, Skeeter realizes what the kids meant in their story. The next day, he searches for Jill at the school to explain that he didn't know where the hotel would be built. However, she cuts him off, telling him not to make excuses and just leave. Later, Skeeter is packing his things when Wendy arrives and angrily confronts him, not about the hotel, but because he told the kids that there are no happy endings. She had hoped that his optimism would influence them. She reveals that she got a teaching job in Arizona and asks him to visit them. She kisses him goodbye. When he is left alone, Skeeter realizes he must do something unexpected to save the day and leaves. Barry arrives at the zoning commissioner's office, with Jill following him, begging him to stop the demolition at Webster Elementary School. Teachers and students gather to protest. Kendall decides that if he doesn't hear anything from Barry about the modification request within the next 20 minutes, he will blow up the school. Meanwhile, Patrick and Bobby take cover. For Barry, the war is over, but when they enter the zoning commissioner's office, which turns out to be Donna, they find her discussing something with Skeeter. Donna refuses Barry's request for modification because Skeeter made strong arguments. Barry gets angry, but by a miracle, they find a location along the coast for the new hotel instead of the school. Kendall wants everyone to turn off their phones because of the sensitive explosives. It's strange that he fixed everything. Jill wants to kiss Skeeter, but Barry interrupts them because he can't reach Kendall, and there are only 13 minutes left before the demolition. At the same time, Bobby and Patrick return to the school to find a spot for their protest sign. Unfortunately, Jill's car is towed, so they have no choice but to steal a motorcycle and speed toward the golf course. Skeeter avoids golf balls like maneuvering through asteroids in space. Meanwhile, Wendy realizes her children are missing. Skeeter knocks over a sign and uses it as a ramp to jump over the gap between a passing train, while Richard takes his wallet from a pickpocket. Now only 1 minute is left before the demolition, and a panicked Wendy yells that her children might be inside, but Kendall ignores her and takes control of the explosives. Skeeter and Jill head toward the school playground and spot the children inside, while Jill grabs the monkey bar. Skeeter jumps off the motorcycle to push Kendall away, just before he activates the explosives. After that, Skeeter announces that the school will remain because a new location for the hotel has been found, and everyone starts cheering. The children safely exit the school building and hug Skeeter, who doesn't want to let them go. Trisha thanks Patrick for saving the school and kisses him. Of course, Skeeter kisses Jill. In the final act, Skeeter starts a business, Marty's Motel on the Roof, where he roasts marshmallows with Jill and the kids. When they run out of marshmallows, he calls room service and the cleaning lady, and Kendall and Aspen arrive. As for the others, Barry became the school nurse at Webster Elementary School and left the hotel business, which was taken over by Violet and her husband Mickey. Skeeter and Jill got married and lived happily ever after, while Bobby and Patrick enjoyed themselves. Like and subscribe so we can reach 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible.